There's a specific kind of silence that lives in a room where everyone knows something you're not supposed to find out. I know that silence well. I grew up inside it. I remember the exact texture of that Easter dinner. The way the afternoon light came through the curtains in long, pale strips. The sound of silverware. Someone refilling a glass. My mother's voice, steady and warm, the way it always was when she was saying something that should have hurt, but was wrapped so carefully in pleasantness that you almost didn't feel the edge until later, sometimes days later, when you were alone and quiet and it finally landed. She was announcing that my sister Vanessa would be inheriting everything. The house, the lake house, the investment accounts, all of it. She said it the way you'd say pass the bread, like it was obvious, like it had always been decided, like there was genuinely no other version of events worth considering. I was sitting 3 feet away, 8 months pregnant, holding a dish I'd spent 2 days cooking, and not one person in that room looked at me. Not once. My name is Mara. I'm 31 years old. And I spent most of my life learning how to exist in spaces where I was never quite meant to belong. Vanessa is 4 years older than me, and from the time she could walk, my parents treated her like she'd been sent directly from heaven with a certificate of authenticity. She was beautiful in that loud, obvious way people immediately notice. Charming, quick-witted. She had a gift for making our parents feel like they were the lucky ones just for knowing her. I was the quiet one, the studious one, the one who got good grades and was told warmly but firmly that practicality was my personality. I went to a state school on a partial scholarship while they paid Vanessa's full tuition at a private university without blinking. When I graduated with honors, my mom said, "See, you didn't even need our help." She meant it as a compliment. I worked in financial compliance for 7 years. Dry, invisible work. The kind of job people's eyes glaze over when you try to explain it. But it paid well, and more importantly, it taught me how money actually moves. Who controls it, who thinks they control it, and the very wide gap between those two things. When I got pregnant with my daughter, I was 30 and unmarried, which in my family was treated like a moral failing, roughly equivalent to arson. My mother pulled me aside at Thanksgiving and told me she hoped I understood this was my problem to manage. Vanessa, sitting nearby, added that having a baby without a husband was so brave, in the tone people use when they actually mean so reckless. My father said nothing. He never did when it came to me. What I didn't tell any of them was that the baby's father, Daniel, and I were actually in a committed relationship and had been for 4 years. We simply hadn't made it public in family circles because, frankly, I was protecting him from them. That decision, in hindsight, was either the smartest thing I ever did or the thing that lit the fuse. The breaking point came 6 weeks after my daughter Nora was born. Vanessa had decided, not asked, decided that Nora would essentially be her accessory. She started referring to her as our baby in group family texts. She'd show up uninvited and take Nora from my arms without asking, posting photos with captions like my heart and my favorite human while I sat there, sore and exhausted and smiling because I didn't want to cause a scene. She told my mother that Nora should stay with her some weekends so I could rest. My mother thought this was a wonderful idea. Nobody asked me. Then one afternoon, my mother came over while I was nursing, sat down across from me, and said, with complete composure, that she thought it would be best if Nora spent more time at their house. That Vanessa was so natural with her, that I seemed overwhelmed, that maybe given my situation, a more stable environment would benefit the baby. I asked her what she meant by situation. She meant being unmarried. She meant my modest apartment. She meant, though she didn't say it, that I had never been the one they pictured building a life worth envying. I told her quietly that Nora wasn't going anywhere. That's when my mother stood up. And I want to be careful about how I describe what happened next, because even now it sits in my chest like a stone. She grabbed my arm, yanked me toward the hallway, and shoved me hard toward the staircase. I caught the railing. I didn't fall, but I felt it in my whole body. She was screaming that the inheritance was meant for Vanessa, that everything they'd built was for her, and that I needed to stop pretending I was owed something. She said, and I will never forget the exact words. Give her the baby or get out of this family. You were never supposed to be the one who mattered. I was standing there holding my 6-week-old daughter, one hand on the railing, completely still. And that's when the front door opened. My mother turned, and the color drained from her face in a way I had genuinely never seen before. She went pale like a sheet, and her hands, the hands that had just shoved me, started trembling. It was Daniel's father, Mr. Ashford. See, what my family didn't know, what I had chosen, carefully and deliberately, not to tell them, was that Daniel's last name was Ashford, as in Ashford Capital, as in the private equity firm that had quietly acquired a controlling interest in my father's company 18 months prior. As in the man standing in my doorway was effectively my father's largest investor and the person with the legal authority to dissolve the board structure my father had spent 30 years building. Mr. Ashford had come to meet his granddaughter for the first time. He looked at my mother. He looked at me. He looked at the railing I was still gripping. And his expression didn't change. It simply closed, the way a door closes before a long silence. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, I also didn't need to make a single phone call, send a single threatening message, or confront anyone. I simply stopped running interference. For years, I had been quietly smoothing things over, vouching for my father's reliability in conversations with Daniel's family, framing my parents in the most generous possible light, gently steering questions away from uncomfortable truths. I stopped doing that. I answered questions honestly when they were asked. That was all. The board review that had been tabled for 2 quarters was rescheduled. My father lost his seat. The inheritance my mother had announced so proudly at Easter, the house, the lake house, the accounts. It turned out a significant portion of those assets were tied to the company's performance and a series of personal guarantees my father had signed without fully reading. Details I understood because, again, financial compliance is what I do. I hadn't created this situation. I had simply never explained to them how precarious it already was. Vanessa called me 14 times in one weekend. My mother sent a message through my aunt, which I read once and didn't respond to. My father left a voicemail that was less an apology and more a negotiation, which told me everything I needed to know about whether anything had actually changed. I moved into a house, a real one, with a yard 2 months later. Daniel and I got married quietly in the spring, with about 12 people present, none of them my family. My daughter has her grandfather's eyes and the kind of laugh that makes strangers turn around and smile. I don't feel victorious about any of it. That's the part no one tells you. When it actually happens, when the people who spent years making you feel small are finally facing the consequences of their own making, it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like grief, briefly, and then it just feels like quiet. I never pushed. I never plotted. I never even raised my voice. I was the overlooked one, the practical one, the background character. And the thing about being invisible for that long is that you learn exactly how everything works, while everyone else is busy taking up space. I didn't destroy my family. I just finally stopped being the thing holding them together.